Tonight, an emergency rescue operation off our coast. 21 crews stuck on a stranded cargo ship as it floats perilously close to shores in heavy seas south of Port Botany. Water torture in our northwest, the Hawkesbury Nepean still rising, homes and livelihoods under threat. Devastation for those already hit hard, communities cleaning up from yet another flood disaster, and still the rain keeps falling. A high-stakes, high-security mission, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese tours devastated Ukrainian cities, pledging more Australian support. Enough is enough, the Premier's bold step to try and stop further industrial action causing havoc for Sydney trains. And mortgage holders holding their breath, the Reserve Bank about to drop another rates bomb.
This is 10 News First, Gadigal Country, with Sandra Sully.
Good evening. First tonight, a precarious operation is underway off our coast. 21 crew are stuck on board a cargo ship that's lost power and is now drifting closer to the rocky shore near the Royal National Park south of Port Botany. Wild weather making conditions too rough to airlift those on board to safety.
Swaying in wild seas, a 170-metre vessel is lashed with rain and wind with engine failure.
The New South Wales Police Force was notified that the vessel had lost power and was drifting towards the cliffs of the Royal National Park.
The Hong Kong-registered Portland Bay bulk carrier departed from Port Kembla yesterday, bound for overseas, but is now bobbing less than 1 nautical mile off Little Gary Beach.
Cars fail, ships fail. That's what happens sometimes at sea.
2 anchors are up against strong southeasterly winds, threatening to inch it closer to the rocks.
It's obviously a very precarious position. Our thoughts are with those who are on board.
Paramedics and police were on standby, but an earlier plan to winch 8 non-essential members of the 21-person crew to the mainland was abandoned.
I have spoken to the Australian Maritime Safety Authority, which has indicated that they believe that it's unsafe to do that at this present time. 2
tugboats were dispatched to direct the ship out to sea.
Our compassion towards the crew and the safety of all responders are key.
The ship was today battling big swells with offshore wave heights of up to 12 metres recorded overnight in Sydney and wind gusts of 70 kilometres an hour.
Yeah, it's pretty concerning, isn't it?
You wouldn't like to be a boat without power?
No, I don't think so. No, I think I'd rather come out on the beach though than against some of the rocks around on the other area.
The multi-agency maritime operation is desperately trying to avoid memorable but worst-case scenarios like this. The Pasha Bulker running aground at Newcastle's Nobby's Beach during a wild 2007 storm. The towing operation now involves 3 tugs as they try and move the vessel into safer, deeper waters, and the next few hours are critical. The plan is to move the ship at least 12 nautical miles offshore and then they can commence repairs on the engine. That's expected to take 4 to 6 hours. They've got the spare parts, they know what the fault is, and keeping the crew on board was deemed the safest option as they battle with atrocious conditions. So there's still a mission ahead tonight, Sandra, but hopefully then the voyage can be on its way and those of us here on the shore can breathe a sigh of relief.
Fingers crossed. All right, Sarah, thank you. Another anxious night is coming for many across Sydney where the flood emergency is far from over. There are more than 100 evacuation orders and warnings, forcing tens of thousands from their homes right along our river system. We begin our coverage in the northwest where a rising Hawkesbury Nepean has again brought devastation.
Barely dry from the last floods 3 months ago. Rain-soaked residents in Sydney's northwest are facing going under again.
It's scary. It is scary. It's a lot of water.
Rhiannon Abbott can only watch on as the water laps ever closer to her doorstep. She's like many others right now, hoping Mother Nature does them a favour.
We're kind of prepped for it to reach my garage again. With a young family at home and being a single parent, it's really emotional.
But they're being warned this edition could be as bad as those in March.
It looks in the ballpark of about the same. Yep.
Already in North Richmond, it's exceeded 14 metres once again, while in Windsor it's sitting above 12.5 metres, edging dangerously close to that 13-metre mark.
There is no give in the system, it's just flowing into our river systems, and obviously the extreme amount of rain leads to a higher risk in relation to flash flooding.
And it's those flash floods which are catching people out. So far, 116 rescues have had to be carried out, 83 of them since 9 p.m. last night. There's been almost 1,600 calls to the SES for help, 87 evacuation warnings are in place, while 74 have been issued telling people to leave. All up, 32,000 people have been impacted.
These warnings, these orders, they are not in place for the sake of it. They are there to keep you and your family safe.
Watching, waiting and fleeing has become the heartbreaking cycle recurring along the Hawkesbury.
As we talk, the rain gets heavier and we're just waiting to see, get the boats ready.
Desperation has turned to frustration, with many along the banks of the river claiming the vast impact could have been avoided.
I think there's a lot of angry people on the dam levels, why they didn't let the water out sooner.
As the Hawkesbury River swelled and water spilled over Warragamba Dam yesterday, locals knew all too well what was coming. With it came the wrenching realisation many would again have to start from scratch.
3 times in a row and finish renovating, and the financial cost is one, the hardship is the other thing, and emotion as well. I mean, it's running high. I mean, a lot of people are struggling.
The Hawkesbury City Council Mayor believes more needs to be done, starting with raising the dam wall.
If they've got a plan, they're not going to do it. Well, what are they going to do? Because they're just leaving us as sitting ducks.
To see what we're seeing right across Sydney, there's no doubt these events are becoming more common, and governments need to adjust and make sure that we respond to the changing environment that we find ourselves in.
And a changing environment is what's making everyone very nervous right now.
We've been here nearly 50 years. I told other people that it's going to be all right, so hopefully it will be.
Samara Gardner is in Windsor. She joins us now. Samara, it is going to be another miserable night there.
Sandra, there's barely been a break in the weather today. The rain continues to fall heavy, and of course that is pushing the floodwaters up where we are in Windsor. It's a very nervous wait for the residents here as they wait to see what damage will be done. Unfortunately, this is something that they've become all too used to. They're exhausted, they're angry and they're frustrated, and they're really anticipating what is to come. As to what they'll wake up to tomorrow, it really comes down to the next few hours. But as yet, there's been no relief for the residents here.
Let's hope it eases soon. Thanks, Samara. Well, south of the city, communities are drying out as another big clean-up event begins. Winds have wreaked havoc on our beaches, and waterlogged homes and businesses are once again facing huge losses for the 4th time this year.
Weather so wild, even Mother Nature is sandbagging. Intense winds buried Maroubra Road in sand last night, while at Camden, days of intense rainfall mean they're tearing up the waterlogged carpets again. For the 4th time this year, floods have washed through the Camden Sports Club, turning the prized bowling green into a pond.
First of all, we've got to get the mud out, and we've got to get the water off the greens.
Over the weekend, dozens of volunteers helped move everything from the lower levels of the club to higher ground in anticipation of another disaster. This is what came soon after.
It's devastating, but, you know, we received a lot of help.
We're lucky the water's gone down and we can sort of try and start to recover, hope it doesn't rain anymore.
These fridges were donated to the club after the major flood event in March this year. Yesterday, they were carried across the road to a neighbour's shed and winched high off the ground as the water crept in.
It just kept on coming higher and higher and higher, and all these freezers and fridges, tens of thousands of dollars worth of equipment, were all on the ground level, and we had to recruit guys from Coles and just to lift everything up.
Les Halleck and his family moved up to Camden in January from Melbourne.
We came straight out of COVID from Melbourne, thinking we're going to get a fresh new start here in New South Wales, and we're already 4 floods in.
I've never seen a flood before, and since we moved here, I've seen 4 of them It's been exciting but not exciting.
When you step inside the bowling club, you get a far better understanding of just how much water was inside this club last night. Those who work here and are cleaning up today say levels like this haven't been seen yet through all the recent flood events this year. This seemingly unbreakable community is once again shaking off the rain, hoping the worst of this latest flooding event has now passed.
If the funds dry up, I think it could close. The club could close, yeah. But then again, we'll just battle through again and we'll get there, yeah.
Taylor Ryan for 10 News First.
Let's bring in our own weather expert now, Josh Holt. Josh, La Nina was declared over, so why are we still seeing so much torrential rain?
Well, Sandra, it's a good question. In fact, many people are asking it. If you take into account the Australian thresholds, La Nina is over for the time being. But if you go by the American thresholds, La Nina is still active. To cut a long story short, we've still got very warm sea surface temperatures off the northern coastline of Australia. And this has again created a moisture feed, tropical moisture feeding down the east coast and feeding that trough of low pressure, which has been sitting off the east coast, helping to cause all this rain. Then we saw that east coast low develop yesterday. That made landfall during the early hours of this morning, but have a look at that strong southeasterly airstream, again driving in that rain across parts of New South Wales. You can see it extending across the Hunter, Sydney, Illawarra region. It's been persistent across areas of Sydney, especially over the weekend. Lightening off somewhat today, but persistent showers still pushing across the region right now as we go to air. Kangaroo Valley, south of Sydney, to give you some idea of the rain, 779 millimetres into the rain gauge. This is now, to 3 o'clock this afternoon, up to 860 millimetres plus. Incredible stuff. Severe weather warnings remain in place for heavy rainfall and damaging winds across a large area, and major flood warnings are still also in place for the Hawkesbury, Nepean and Colo rivers. So we've still got heavy rain falling at the moment. Warnings in place. We'll have more on this a little bit later, Sandra.
All right, thank you, Josh. Our Prime Minister has taken as firm a stance as possible on the Russian invasion of Ukraine as he saw the devastation inflicted on the country firsthand. Anthony Albanese is the latest in a long line of leaders to arrive in war-torn Kyiv, also visiting nearby areas of Bucha, Hostomel and Irpin, sites of alleged war crimes by Russian troops. The new $100 million aid he pledged comes on top of a package of around $290 million, making us one of the biggest supporters of the Zelensky regime.
Walking the remains of a path where residents had run for their lives.
When did the Russians arrive?
The Prime Minister visibly disturbed.
You can see the use of tanks, missiles, heavy artillery being used in a civilian area. It's just devastating.
Under the close guard of special forces and a media blackout, Anthony Albanese made the secret trip to Ukraine, visiting war-ravaged towns.
This is a mortar shell, typical trace.
Hundreds of people were massacred in this neighbourhood of Irpin.
What's clearly a residential building. Another one just behind it, brutally assaulted. This is a war crime.
Lighting a candle in honour of the victims. The PM then, like other world leaders, meeting President Volodymyr Zelensky in the capital of Kyiv, pledging in person an extra $100 million in military support, taking Australia's total assistance package to nearly $400 million.
We will provide an additional 14 armoured personnel carriers, an additional 20 Bushmasters, drones and other equipment that has been requested by Ukraine.
Also announcing duty-free imports on Ukrainian goods and further sanctions on high-profile Russians. But in thanking Australia for extra aid, President Zelensky recognises the help of one country would not be enough. Russia has found a weak point. The battle in Lysychansk is the most difficult and dangerous situation, he said. The city is now in Russian hands, Ukraine vowing to restore control with new weaponry. This is the first time the country's welcomed an Australian PM. President Zelensky only wishing their meeting was during peacetime.
Australia stands ready to continue to support the government and the people of Ukraine for as long as it takes for Ukraine to emerge victorious.
Chloe Bouris for 10 News First.
The government is headed to court to try and stop rolling industrial action on the state's train network. It has launched proceedings in the Fair Work Commission against the Rail, Tram and Bus Union, which is planning more disruptions this week. The union is fighting for safety modifications to the intercity fleet and better pay and conditions.
To inconvenience mums and dads right across our state is completely unacceptable, and it is wrong, and it needs to be called out and it needs to stop.
The Premier has also confirmed he will meet with the union leadership this week. Still to come, a record number of Aussies swindled by scams. Why more of us than ever have fallen foul of fraud. Ready to rise, the looming rate hike set to deal Aussie households with yet another blow to their budget. Weaving a web of medical magic, the Aussie funnel web spider on the verge of a research breakthrough. And Freddie stays true, making minimal changes for the Blues' must-win Origin 3. It's coming up. An unexpected witness has told Chris Dawson's murder trial that he saw and spoke with his missing wife Lynette at a Warners Bay pub near Newcastle. He is the only witness called by Dawson's defence team, claiming she told him she had run away and had plans to go to Bali and then travel further overseas.
Since Lynette Dawson's disappearance 40 years ago, several people have come forward claiming to have spotted her. This man, Paul Cooper, says he saw and spoke with the missing mother. She just wanted me to book a motel for her in my name. She explained that she didn't have any identification with her, that she'd left her husband, that she'd left everything behind. It's a conversation Mr Cooper claims to have had at a Warners Bay pub in early 1982. The witness says he even suggested to the woman he believes to be Lynette that police might think her husband had killed her. When I looked back at her, she had a different demeanour. It sort of shocked me because I thought that might have been the intent.
Mr Cooper is the only witness called by Dawson's defence. Asked why he didn't go to police, he says he didn't have a good rapport with them, admitting he has spent time behind bars for theft and dishonesty offences.
Now, in closing submissions, the Crown says in all the circumstances this court should reject the proposition that Lynette Dawson simply walked out on her life and was alive to be seen in 1982, 83 and 84 because that is not a reasonable conclusion. Chris Dawson claims he was at the Northbridge Baths when Lynette called him saying she was going away for a few days. The Crown disputes that, alleging he had three motives to kill his wife. Because of his deep animosity towards her, his obsession with the family babysitter and desire to avoid the financial fallout of a failed marriage. Alice Hogg for 10 News First.
A potentially life-saving drug for heart attack and stroke patients that uses the poisonous venom from funnel web spiders is one step closer to reality. After more than 5 years of research, scientists at the University of Queensland say the medicine is now ready for human trials.
You wouldn't hear too many people saying this.
This is a Kagari funnel web.
Yeah, it's my favourite spider.
But there's a pretty good reason why.
Oh, look at that. Oh, she had to go that time.
The deadly venom from the Kagari or Fraser Island funnel web is being turned around into something life-saving. University of Queensland researchers are using it to develop a new drug, and now, thanks to a $23 million investment, it's ready for human trials.
When a heart attack or a stroke occurs, this is caused by the lack of blood flow to the organ. And so, as a consequence, billions of cells will die. This drug is intended to stop that cell death response from happening in the first place.
It's all thanks to a molecule found in the spider's venom.
And so a drug like this has potential to really transform clinical care.
There's currently no medication to prevent heart attack damage, and with strokes it can only be taken up to 4 hours after the incident. But with this drug, it doubles that crucial window.
So those people, for example, that might live in a regional area and take a long time to get to the hospital would benefit even if they got there 8 hours later.
And it's important, as around 15 million people die from heart attack and stroke every year.
This is one of the world's biggest killers, and this is a multi-billion-dollar market. So
there is a really big patient need for new treatment.
Amanda Hart for 10 News First.
Up next, anger and protests in the US over a deadly police shooting that left an unarmed black man with more than 60 gunshot wounds. Also, tourists' terror the moment a glacier collapses, sending huge chunks of ice and rock ploughing into hikers. And the Olympics chief's $7.5 million promise to ensure that the Ukrainian flag will fly high at the next Games. But first, it's time for a quick look at this miserable weather. So here's Josh.
Good evening, Sandra. Well, as mentioned earlier in the bulletin, huge amounts of rainfall across the weekend and into Monday as this immense weather system stretching 3,000 kilometres continues to deliver not only rain for parts of New South Wales but extending north up through areas of Queensland. But let's have a look at our weather system off the coast. Our east coast low making landfall around the Hunter overnight. But to its south, we've had this vigorous southeasterly moist airstream again continuing to drive in those showers right along parts of the New South Wales coast. As I mentioned a little bit earlier in the bulletin, we've had 72-hour rainfall totals upwards of 700 millimetres south of Sydney. Absolutely incredible. Today, showers have persisted. You can see extensive rainfall over the weekend. But as we got into Monday, it did start to break up slightly, but those showers have been persistent, and western areas of Sydney have seen another 60 to 80 millimetres since 9 o'clock this morning, so some decent falls there. There is plenty of warning still in place right across parts of the state. We'll look at that in detail, and we'll have the full forecast coming up at 5 to 6.
Denmark is gripped by grief tonight after a shooting rampage at a Copenhagen shopping centre left at least 3 people dead and others fighting for their lives in hospital. A 22-year-old Danish man has been arrested and police are now investigating if it was an act of terror. A US correspondent, John Paul Gonzo, reports, and a warning, some of the vision in this next story is disturbing.
First you hear the gunshots, then you see the shooter. The Danish national waving around his weapon of choice. He used a rifle to hunt shoppers, chasing people through the mall and opening fire.
It's pure terror. This is awful, you know. You might wonder how a person could do this to other human beings, but it's beyond, anything that's possible.
Running for their lives. Not everyone would make it. Survivors hid in storage rooms and staircases, some filming the gunman.
We ran up the roof and were stuck there for a while, and then people were panicking all over the place and people crying.
Armed police eventually stormed the shopping centre. Upstairs! Arresting a 22-year-old. Authorities say they can't rule out terror as a motive, but at this stage they believe he acted alone. The Danish head of police detailed the shooter's grim toll. 3 people have been killed, a man in his 40s and 2 young people. Several people were injured. 3 are in a critical condition. A Harry Styles concert at a nearby arena was cancelled in the wake of the shooting.
I'm heartbroken, along with the people of Copenhagen. I adore this city.
Denmark's gun control laws are strict and shootings are rare. The last attack was in 2015 when 2 people were killed at a cultural centre and synagogue. Tonight, the country is again mourning as police work out why a 22-year-old felt compelled to massacre innocent strangers. John Paul Gonzo for 10 News First, London.
Protesters have hit the streets in the United States after body cameras released of another fatal police shooting. Officers chased a 25-year-old black man, Jayland Walker, when he failed to stop for a minor traffic violation. After several minutes, he jumped out of his car and ran, but died in a hail of bullets. His body was found with more than 60 gunshot wounds. The Vision has seen hundreds take to the streets in protest, including Jayland's loved ones.
It's like deja vu, and every time you turn around, you're seeing it on TV, you're seeing it, but until it hits home, that's when it's so bad.
What's it like for you looking at that pin you've got?
I love him. I've known him since he was in his mother's belly. It's hard. It's hard.
Protesters are demanding the 8 officers involved face charges. They have been stood down on full pay while their actions on the night are investigated. At least 6 people have been killed and 8 others are injured after a glacier collapsed in the northern Italian Alps. The massive chunk of frozen ice and rock broke off following record high temperatures. The deadly avalanche hit an access road filled with several roped parties of mountaineers, sweeping them down the mountain. There were reports up to 15 hikers were in the group. Several rescue teams and 5 helicopters searched the region, but no other casualties were found. The president of the International Olympic Committee, Thomas Bach, has visited Ukraine. The IOC pledging to triple its fund to support the war-torn country to $7.5 million.
To tell the athletes and the coaches and all the entourage that they are not alone in these worldwide Olympic communities, that we are standing at their side.
He said he expects to see the Ukrainian flag flying high at the Paris Olympics in 2 years' time, held up by a strong and successful team from Ukraine. In the wake of Typhoon Chaba, more fierce weather has been buffeting southern China. Off the coast, this waterspout kept onlookers captivated for 10 minutes. It lost power as it reached the shoreline, but still managed to kick up a sandstorm. Luckily, it definitely was not beach weather and no injuries were reported. Pride parades are sweeping the globe, but in Spain they were a little different. Madrid's LGBT community also marched for animal rights. Under the slogan Feathers and Paws, they brought their pets along to call for an end to animal cruelty. And they stepped up their campaign for more animal shelters, with almost 300,000 dogs and cats needing care. Still to come, we'll have the latest on Monday's top stories. Plus, another rate hike is on the horizon. How high is it tipped to go, and what will it mean for your family budget? And the results are in, and they're not looking good. Australians lost a record amount of money to scams last year, but experts say the real sum could be even higher.
Victoria's Basement is cooking up a storm with sizzling hot prices. Up to 66% off Tefal and Genio premium cookware sets from $125. $900 off Scam Pan Set and Giant 10-piece cookware sets now $399. In-store and online at Victoria's Basement.
G'day there. We'll start with the obvious. Very wet around town. Goes without saying, if you are hitting the roads, please be careful. At best, slippery, at worst, flooding. And with that in mind, we do have some flooding, seeing some closures. Oxford Falls Road closed at the Wakehurst Parkway. A similar story in for Milperra. Newbridge Road's closed between Henry Lawson Drive and Bullcourt Avenue. And a few bridges out of action. Windsor Bridge, Yarramundi Bridge and the Richmond Bridge. I'm Andy Stewart in the Victoria's Basement Traffic Centre. Have a happy evening.
Tonight's top stories. A delicate operation is underway to prevent a cargo ship from running aground south of Botany. Wild weather forcing a rescue attempt of 21 crew on board to be abandoned. 32,000 Sydney residents are under evacuation warnings as torrential rain causes flooding along our river systems. And the Premier is taking the rail union to court in a bid to stop further industrial action on our train lines. Mortgage holders will know in less than 24 hours how much the next interest rate hike will be, with economists warning the most aggressive series of rises in nearly 30 years may well be upon us. Now, they're forecasting the cash rate could triple between now and early next year.
When the Reserve Bank Board meets tomorrow, there's only one way they're moving the cash rate, and that's up.
Without a doubt, they'll raise rates tomorrow.
But by how much? Last month's double whammy hike caught economists by surprise. Today, they're tipping a repeat performance.
I'm pretty sure it's going to be a 0.5% increase.
The 0.5 is going to be the right policy.
We think interest rates will go up by 50 basis points.
Yes, they'll probably raise rates by another 0.5%.
In a recent speech, Governor Philip Lowe foreshadowed just two options, 0.25 or 0.5. The expectation that he'll go hard early.
We need to be getting back up to more appropriate normal interest rates for a normal functioning economy.
So what it's trying to do here with these more aggressive hikes is send a signal to all of us that inflation is not going to be tolerated at these higher levels.
Right now, the cash rate is at 0.85%, An increase by 50 basis points to 1.35% would mean repayments on a $500,000 mortgage would lift $137 a month. For a $1 million mortgage, it's $273. And fixed rates are now sky high.
People are turning their backs on fixing in droves. The latest data from the ABS shows that just 12% of new loans are now fixed ones.
Still, further rises are coming.
For me, I think the cash rate will end this year at or above 2%.
I think the cash rate will get up to 2.6%, and I think that peak will be in February next year.
And while grocery and fuel prices are soaring, the property market is taking a hit, squeezing mortgage holders whose equity is falling almost as fast as their interest rates rise. Daniel Sutton for 10 News First.
We're being urged to be on alert for scammers, with a record number of Australians swindled last year. An eye-watering $2 billion was lost to scams in 2021. But the consumer watchdog fears underreporting puts the real total much higher. Investment scams left people the most shortchanged, making up more than $700 million worth of losses, while vulnerable groups were among the hardest hit. The regulator says people over 65 reported the highest losses, and reports from people with disabilities doubled, and those from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds experienced an 88% increase in losses. Matt Burke is here now with a look at the day in sport. Matt, it's more than a week away, but the Origin decider has already got people talking.
Indeed, Sandra, that's right. Good evening. It's all to do with the selections for Game 3 from the coaches. That's coming up next. The Wallabies show off their First Nations jersey in a smoking ceremony as they prepare for the second test against England. And scary scenes at Silverstone as the controversial Formula One Halo plays its part in a horror crash.
Tonight's Sport Report is brought to you by Sportsbet. Make it look easy with Sportsbet Same Game Multi. Combine all your favourite markets into one bet for bigger odds. Make it a multi with Sportsbet.
Good evening. As the Blues get ready to face the Maroons in a Suncorp Stadium decider, there's been a huge blow and a big surprise at the selection table. Payne Haas has been ruled out with a shoulder injury, while Jack Whiten has failed to make his way back into the side.
Ready for a Suncorp Stadium showdown, and again it's a new-look Blues.
They were able to do it under pressure, so we know what works, and I can't see why this week isn't going to be a positive, enjoyable week.
Brad Fittler forced to make changes, 30-year-old Cowboy Jordan McLean to start in place of the injured Payne Haas. 9 years after first being in the squad, he becomes the 5th oldest New South Wales debutant.
I was close to picking him in the team earlier, and obviously he come into the squad Game 2. But what he's been doing for the Cowboys is a bit of an unsung hero, I think.
It's the only change in somewhat of a shock. Jack Whiten named 18th man, with Sifa Talakai retaining his bench spot.
Definitely not, mate. Always blessed to be in this camp. You know, if you're here, it's a blessing, and that's why you look at things.
That was a tough one, and I think Sifa, the versatility he gives us on the bench, was mostly, the reason why we went with Sifa instead of Jack.
The biggest out wasn't the coach's call. Latrell Mitchell withdrawing himself from Sky Blue sits easy with Fittler.
So I think it just worked out well for everyone. I think it was mostly sudden for everyone, but I think at the end of the day, it's just a really smart thing to do.
Not since 1994 have the Blues won a decider in Brisbane after losing Game 1 in Sydney.
It's an awesome atmosphere, so it's a great opportunity, as well as, a lot of people see it as a negative, I see it as a positive.
As the old adage goes, records are there to be broken. Trent Simpson for 10 News First.
And to the Queensland camp now, and Billy Slater is backing his old boys. The coach defending his decision to pick and stick with Dane Gagai and Josh Papali'i, despite underwhelming performances in Game 2. Cowboys prop Tom Gilbert joined the camp for the first time, still buzzing after a life-changing phone call.
Goodbyes and well wishes all round. Maroons happy back in Brisbane, keen to put their Perth pasting behind them. Tom Gilbert's feeling pretty good. The Cowboys prop doesn't usually get this type of attention in Townsville.
It's a dream come true, and there's nothing I've wanted more as a footy player.
and to live this out is, it's a huge moment for myself and my family, of course.
The phone call, one to remember.
I realised how much Queensland means to him and how much playing for the Maroons mean to him. So it was quite an emotional call. You can read between the lines there.
He's been in great form, so I'm looking forward to playing with him.
There's a few Maroons who haven't been in form though. Dane Gagai's place in the side wasn't so certain.
Oh, you don't have to look too far to see what Dane Gagai brings to the Queensland team.
What makes him?
I know what he brings. Yeah.
While Josh Papali'i's lack of impact has created its fair share of scrutiny.
We know what Papa brings to our team. He's a real leader. He starts the game off really well for us.
But just because Billy is backing his boys doesn't mean they aren't on notice.
There's no doubt that individuals in our team can be better. They can do their job better.
The coach set to take it upon himself to educate and inspire his squad this week, and he doesn't have far to look for inspiration.
This Friday is going to be the 42nd anniversary to Arthur Beetson running out onto Lang Park, and that's pretty ironic that we're going to be going out there only a few days later.
A new page will soon be written into the Origin storybook. Josh McLean for 10 News First.
The Sydney Roosters have signed controversial club hopper Matt Lodge. The prop was paid out a rumoured $700,000 to leave the Warriors after an ugly dispute with the club's owner. The hard man tearing up while discussing his move to the Tricolours.
I think if I let everything that people say in the past get to me and all those headlines and attention, I probably would have never made it back because, it's just continuous. So I'll kind of block that stuff out, and I already feel like I've got the support of the people in the building. That's all I need to put my body on the line and play hard.
The 27-year-old prop will be paid $100,000 to see out the rest of the season with the Roosters. Alfa Romeo driver Zhou Guanyu says Formula One's halo saved his life after a horrifying crash on the opening lap of the British Grand Prix. The Chinese driver was fortunate to survive this incident just after the start of the race.
He was actually, Martin, upside down, as you can see, and the roll hoop and the halo very much doing its job before the car digs in, and you do not ever want to see accidents like that.
The replays were only shown once it was established he was OK. While in his 150th race, Ferrari's Carlos Sainz broke through for his first ever victory in Formula One. Well, the quest for a 7th Wimbledon crown for Novak Djokovic is another step closer. He made pretty easy work of Dutchman Tim Rijthoven in 4 sets in his 25th straight win on grass.
That's a great shot.
He'll meet Yannick Sinner in the quarter-finals. The 10th seed didn't drop a serve against young gun Carlos Alcaraz. Not playing at the All England club this year, but Roger Federer can still grab a headline. The 8-time winner saying he hopes to play Wimbledon one more time. The Wallabies will sing the national anthem in the local Indigenous language when they play England in Brisbane on Saturday. They started NAIDOC Week with a smoking ceremony and dance performance today, welcoming Kurtley Beale back into the squad, but a leg injury is keeping him out until next month.
Yeah, I haven't run in like 5 months, so it's been a bit of a whirlwind. Wasn't quite the best finish in finishing up at Racing, but we'll sort out a strong program, get myself fighting fit.
While Tom Banks also out with the Wallabies, he'll have to make a big call at fullback soon, while Darcy Swain finds out his fate at the judiciary tomorrow night. And Sandra, just to let the selectors know, my number is still the same if they need someone.
And you're always available.
I can stretch now.
Thanks, Berkey. Always great to watch at the weekend. Josh is back after the break with the very latest on this wild weather.
Good evening. Still an incredibly dangerous situation unfolding through western parts of Sydney as we go to air this evening. Have a look at this weather feature. It stretches all the way from northern Queensland down to southern New South Wales, some 3,000 kilometres. We've had widespread rainfall across areas of eastern New South Wales and also that heavy rain stretching into the eastern part of Queensland today. So what's causing this significant rain event? Well, as I say, you must look at different parts of the atmosphere when you're looking at these weather systems, and the most most notable feature is what's happening around about 5.5 kilometres up from the surface. And these are the temperatures at that altitude. You can see this tongue of very cold air down into the -20s and approaching areas of central and eastern Australia. When you've got that very cold, dry air aloft, it helps to drive these weather features. You get those towering clouds up through the atmosphere that are able to dump heavy rain in a short period of time. It also drops the pressure at the surface. That's why we've seen that low pressure trough off the eastern seaboard and these east coast lows form up, some of which have driven in some very heavy rainfall. And today, even though the east coast low weakened over the Hunter, we've seen that steady southeasterly moist airstream over parts of the Illawarra and Sydney region, which is continuing at the moment. But huge amounts of rain over the past 48 hours. As you can see, there's the east coast low, made landfall just near Newcastle. Showers today a little bit further south of that in and across Sydney and Wollongong. And just have a look at the Sydney radar over the past couple of days. It's been absolutely relentless, and that is why we've got those major floodwaters, which are a feature across areas of the Nepean and Hawkesbury valleys. Moving into some of the rainfall totals, these are the 72-hour rainfall totals across some areas. Kangaroo Valley, south of Sydney, 779 millimetres. But now this rain gauge to 3 o'clock this afternoon, up above 860 millimetres. That is nearly 1 metre of rainfall. Absolutely incredible stuff. Watamola, 691, and Picton, which flows into the Nepean, 280 plus millimetres. Severe weather warnings remain in place tonight. They've also been updated for heavy rainfall and possible damaging wind gusts over 90 kilometres per hour for the Sydney, Illawarra, Hunter and Central Tablelands. 3-hour rain rates possible of between 50 and 75 millimetres. That can cause flash flooding in built-up areas, and no doubt we'll see continued river rises tonight because that rain is still continuing to fall. We've got a major flood warning in place for the Hawkesbury, Nepean, Colo rivers, major flooding at Windsor at the March 2021 and 2022 levels. So you've got to feel for the residents across these areas. They're going through it for a third time. The lower Hunter and Central Coast is where we've got our flood watch. Major flooding occurring along the Hawkesbury and Nepean Valley, as we've already touched on. What's going to happen next? Well, as you can see with this east coast low, it started to peter out over the Hunter today, as mentioned. We've still got that southeasterly airstream, a feature during Tuesday and Wednesday, but then by Thursday and Friday, this weather system does move away from the coast. Now, in celebration of NAIDOC Week, we've got our traditional names here replacing our normal names on the national forecast. Gadigal, Sydney, 16 with rain periods tomorrow. Naarm, Melbourne, 14 and partly cloudy. Tandanya, 16 and partly cloudy tomorrow as well. And sunny skies for Boorloo in the west there, 20 degrees, the maximum forecast temperature. Plenty happening in and across areas of New South Wales tonight. We'll have more on this coming up shortly.
Tonight's top stories: a maritime emergency off the east coast, wild weather, a stricken ship and 21 crew members left in the dark. Another nervous night as a flood threat looms large. Tens of thousands of people are being forced from their homes as the river rises just as fast as residents' fears. A young jockey in the fight of her life, Leah Kilner, critically injured in a race fall at Grafton. Tonight she remains in a coma with her family by her side. And the PM's pledge to Ukraine. Anthony Albanese's high-stakes, high-security visit to a war zone. A third tugboat is now on the way to help a cargo ship that's lost power off the east coast. An attempt to winch some of the 21 crew members on board to safety had to be abandoned this afternoon. The weather just too wild.
Swaying in wild seas, a 170-metre vessel is lashed with rain and wind with engine failure.
The New South Wales Police Force was notified that the vessel had lost power and was drifting towards the cliffs of the Royal National Park.
The Hong Kong-registered Portland Bay bulk carrier departed from Port Kembla yesterday, bound for overseas, but is now bobbing less than 1 nautical mile off Little Gary Beach.
Cars fail, ships fail. That's what happens sometimes at sea.
2 anchors are up against strong southeasterly winds, threatening to inch it closer to the rocks.
It's obviously a very precarious position. Our thoughts are with those who are on board.
Paramedics and police were on standby, but an earlier plan to winch 8 non-essential members of the 21-person crew to the mainland was abandoned.
I have spoken to the Australian Maritime Safety Authority, which has indicated that they believe that it's unsafe to do that at this present time.
2 tugboats were dispatched to direct the ship out to sea.
Our compassion towards the crew and the safety of all responders are key.
The ship was today battling big swells with offshore wave heights of up to 12 metres recorded overnight in Sydney and wind gusts of 70 kilometres an hour. A 3rd tugboat has joined the towing operation with a critical few hours ahead as the team attempts to move the ship 12 nautical miles offshore and commence engine repairs. Sarah Naven for 10 News First.
Tens of thousands of Sydney residents are under evacuation warnings tonight as another flood disaster hits the city. Torrential rain is still falling across Sydney as waters rise, inundating homes and businesses.
As we go to air, flood peaks are still to be reached in parts of northwestern Sydney. In the southwest, water levels are falling. For the 4th time in a year, the clean-up begins again.
I've never seen so much rain. It's like we're in the tropics, especially the way it comes down.
Of all the recent floods, this, they say, is the worst.
13th of April was about there, and this one that's it there.
Most shocking was the speed.
Between it being near the front door and us having the sandbags to all the way to the back of the workshop would have been about 5 or 6 minutes.
The crisis tonight remains alive downstream. 109 evacuation orders are in force. Residents in dozens more districts are under the lower level evacuation warnings.
These instructions, these warnings, these orders, they are not in place for the sake of it. They are there to keep you and your family safe.
The multiple flood events have left the ground saturated.
There's no give in the system, it's just flowing into our river systems, and obviously the extreme amount of rain leads to a higher risk in relation to flash flooding.
Even with rainfall set to ease in the coming days, rivers will remain at major flood levels. More water spilling from the Warragamba Dam, the new Windsor Bridge completely lost under an island of debris.
I think there's a lot of angry people on the dam levels, why they didn't let the water out sooner. They knew all this rain was coming.
This is the 3rd time it's been like this. This house was under last time, three times in a row. It's so bad. I mean, people just finished renovating and you know, it's just financially, I mean, think about it.
Many people are now waiting for a national disaster declaration which would free up emergency funds for people who've been forced from their homes. It all adds up to a multi-billion-dollar flood disaster bill right across the east coast of Australia in just the last few months.
And they ought to stop building all the houses they build.
Those decisions are for another day, but
we're seeing these flood events more regularly. There is no doubt about that.
Hugh Riminton for 10 News First.
A promising young jockey is tonight in the fight of her life after a horror race fall in Grafton at the weekend. Leah Kilner suffered critical injuries and was flown from northern New South Wales to Brisbane, where she remains in a coma. Chris Campy is outside the hospital. He joins us now. Chris, her family did receive some positive news this afternoon.
Certainly some quite surprising but very positive news for the family tonight. Sandra, we've been getting that via Leah's parents, Siobhan and Greg from Grafton, who are by her side, of course, tonight. Now, Siobhan's been sending out text messages with updates for those concerned. Earlier today, she told us that Leah has escaped serious spinal injury. So that was, of course, great news to start with. But even better, just a short time ago, she sent out another text that said that Leah did wake from that coma briefly today. She was awake long enough to be asked to squeeze her mother's hand, and she was able to do that. Now, she was then induced back into that coma because doctors want to bring her out of it gently, and that will take some time. Her mother says she is fighting, and her trainer Rob certainly agrees that she's got the fight in her to come out the other side.
But she's a fighter, and I suppose if there's one thing in her favour, it's her feistiness and her youth. And she's an athlete, so hopefully she pulls through.
Now, Leah is an incredibly successful young apprentice jockey. She's won a staggering 204 races in her short career since 2017. And certainly the racing community and friends and family from Grafton to Brisbane have been reaching out to the family, and they'll be crossing everything that she comes out the other side of this in the coming days.
Yeah, let's hope she pulls through. Thanks, Chris. Australia will send another $100 million worth of military vehicles and drones to Ukraine as it tries to defend against the Russian invasion. The Prime Minister making the pledge in person during a secret high-security trip.
Walking the remains of a path where residents had run for their lives.
You can see the use of tanks, missiles, heavy artillery being used in a civilian area. It's just devastating.
Under the close guard of special forces and a media blackout, Anthony Albanese made the secret trip to Ukraine, visiting war-ravaged towns.
This is a mortar shell.
Hundreds of people were massacred in this neighbourhood of Irpin.
Brutally assaulted. This is a war crime.
The PM then, like other world leaders, meeting President Volodymyr Zelensky in the capital of Kyiv, pledging in person an extra $100 million in military support, taking Australia's total assistance package to nearly $400 million.
We will provide an additional 14 armoured personnel carriers, an additional 20 Bushmasters, drones and other equipment that has been requested by Ukraine.
But in thanking Australia for extra aid, President Zelensky recognises the help of one country would not be enough. Russia has found a weak point. The battle in Lysychansk is the most difficult and dangerous situation, he said. The city's now in Russian hands, Ukraine vowing to restore control with new weaponry.
Australia stands ready to continue to support the government and the people of Ukraine for as long as it takes for Ukraine to emerge victorious.
Chloe Bouris for 10 News First.
Shoppers in Denmark were forced to run for their lives when a gunman opened fire in a busy mall, killing at least 3 people. A 22-year-old Danish man has been arrested, and police are now investigating if it was an act of terror. And a warning, some of the vision in this story is disturbing.
A lone shooter in a Copenhagen shopping centre on a murderous rampage. The Danish national waving around his weapon of choice. He used a rifle to hunt shoppers, chasing people through the mall and opening fire.
It's pure terror. This is awful, you know. You might wonder how a person could do this to other human beings, but it's beyond anything that's possible.
Running for their lives, not all would make it.
We ran up the roof and were stuck there for a while, and then people were panicking all over the place and people crying.
Armed police eventually stormed the shopping centre.
Upstairs!
Arresting a 22-year-old. Authorities say at this stage terror can't be ruled out as a motive. The Danish head of police detailed the shooter's grim toll. We have a situation in which 3 people have been killed, a man in his 40s and 2 young people. Several people were also injured. 3 are in a critical condition. Denmark's gun control laws are strict and shootings are rare, but tonight the country is mourning as police work out why a 22-year-old felt compelled to massacre innocent strangers. John Paul Gonzo for 10 News First, London.
Just ahead, we've got the latest in sport, including one Origin coach picks and sticks while the other throws in a surprise. And scary scenes at the Silverstone Formula One with the halo playing its part with a crash before the first corner. Mr Sport, Matty Burke is back with the latest in sports headlines. Matt, no real surprises. The Maroons coach shows some faith.
He does, Sandra. That's right. Good evening. Billy Slater will pick and stick with Dane Gagai and Josh Papali'i despite being below their best in Origin 2. Cowboys prop Tom Gilbert joined camp for the first time today, on top of the world after an emotional phone call.
Goodbyes and well wishes all round.
Maroons happy back in Brisbane, keen to put their Perth pasting behind them. Tom Gilbert's feeling pretty good. The Cowboys prop doesn't usually get this type of attention in Townsville.
It's a dream come true, and yeah, there's nothing I've wanted more as a footy player. And to live this out is, yeah, it's a huge moment for myself and my family, of course.
The phone call, one to remember.
I realised how much Queensland means to him and how much playing for the Maroons mean to him. So it was quite an emotional call. You can read between the lines there.
He's been in great form, so I'm looking forward to playing with him.
There's a few Maroons who haven't been in form though. Dane Gaggai's place in the side wasn't so certain.
Oh, you don't have to look too far to see what Dane Gaggai brings to the Queensland team.
What makes him?
I know what he brings. Yeah.
While Josh Papali'i's lack of impact has created its fair share of scrutiny.
We know what Papa brings to our team. He's a real leader. He starts the game off really well for us.
But just because Billy is backing his boys doesn't mean they aren't on notice.
There's no doubt that individuals in our team can be better. They can do their job better.
The coach set to take it upon himself to educate and inspire his squad this week, and he doesn't have far to look for inspiration.
This Friday is going to be the 42nd anniversary to Arthur Beetson running out onto Lang Park, and that's pretty ironic that we're going to be going out there only a few days later.
A new page will soon be written into the Origin storybook. Josh McLean for 10 News First.
Well, there's been a big surprise and a big blow at the selection table for the Blues ahead of the Origin decider. Payne Haas ruled out with a shoulder injury, while Jack Whiten has failed to make his way back into the side.
Ready for a Suncorp Stadium showdown, and again it's a new-look Blues.
They were able to do it under pressure, so we know what works, and I can't see why this week isn't going to be a positive, enjoyable week.
Brad Fittler forced to make changes, 30-year-old Cowboy Jordan McLean to start in place of the injured Payne Haas. 9 years after first being in the squad, he becomes the 5th oldest New South Wales debutant.
I was close to picking him in the team earlier, and obviously he come into the squad game 2. But what he's been doing for the Cowboys is a bit of an unsung hero, I think.
It's the only change in somewhat of a shock. Jack Whiten named 18th man, with Sifa Talakai retaining his bench spot.
Definitely not, mate. Always blessed to be in this camp. You know, if you're here, it's a blessing, and that's why you got to look at things.
That was a tough one, and I think Sifa, the versatility he gives us on the bench, was mostly, the reason why we went with Sifa instead of Jack.
The biggest out wasn't the coach's call. Latrell Mitchell withdrawing himself from Sky Blue sits easy with Fittler.
So I think it just worked out well for everyone. I think it was mostly sudden for everyone, but I think at the end of the day it's just a really smart thing to do.
Not since 1994 have the Blues won a decider in Brisbane after losing Game 1 in Sydney.
It's an awesome atmosphere, so it's a great opportunity, as well as, a lot of people see it as a negative, I see it as a positive.
As the old adage goes, records are there to be broken. Trent Simpson for 10 News First.
Mitch Swepson says he's ready to forge his partnership with Nathan Lyon against the Spin Kings of India. After a pressure-relieving first test in Sri Lanka, the Queensland leggy is back with confidence.
I love bowling with Gaz. It's been great both times in Pakistan and here. He's been great to work with, and I'm obviously got one eye on India. That's definitely a goal of mine and a goal of this group.
And the heroics of Travis Head have him in line to be the third spinner against Sri Lanka on Friday, but John Holland has been added to the squad for the injured Ashton Agar.
Oh, that's close.
Sydney coach John Longmire admits his team needs to be more consistent to maintain its place in the top 8. The Swans have been poised to make finals this season, but suffered surprise losses to Essendon and Port Adelaide in recent weeks. Off target in front of goal, Sydney booted a 14 behinds, its 9-point loss to the Bombers.
I think we're still striving for that consistency. I mean, before the weekend's game, we'd won 3 out of 4. We'd lost the game against Port, and we didn't take our chances on the weekend when we needed to.
The Swans are in 8th position as they head into round 17. Alfa Romeo driver Zhou Guanyu says the Formula One Halo saved his life after a horrifying crash in the first corner of the British Grand Prix. 6 cars were involved in 2 pile-ups in an action-packed race. Now, what seemed like a simple single for Taylor Ward became one of the baseball's biggest bloopers so far this season when he became distracted by the ball coming into first base.
And Malby tried to sneak in behind Taylor Ward and took a throw.
Call on the field is overturned.
A standing ovation for an overturn because Machete's that good.
So for getting tagged without his foot on the bag, Ward walks off with our, we're going to call it a spray of the day. And Suls, you've got to know your surroundings. And also, what was the coach doing in the background there? I think it's just admiring.
But no one's forgotten that you've thrown your hat in the ring for a Wallabies caller.
There you go.
Could you play?
I might break in the warm-up.
Yeah, Google him. That's what you do. Google him. He's a superstar. See you tomorrow. Stay with us. Your week ahead weather-wise is coming up next.
Good evening. The flood emergency continuing across parts of Sydney as we go live to air. You can see this immense weather system stretching through the eastern parts of Queensland and right across areas of eastern New South Wales. As mentioned through the bulletin, the east coast low has petered out over the Hunter during the early hours of this morning, but in behind it we've seen another centre form up a little bit further offshore and a strong, steady southeasterly moist airflow in and across areas of the Illawarra and Sydney region today, and that has prolonged that shower activity. Now, as we get through tomorrow, I'm expecting rain periods through the eastern areas of Queensland, in particular northward of the Sunshine Coast. For New South Wales, again, those showers will be a feature, most likely contracting a little bit further northward to incorporate areas of the Hunter and also areas of the mid-north coast. Moving into the southeast forecast, we're expecting some showers tomorrow. Top temperatures of 16 degrees for Ipswich, 16 for Logan and 12 degrees for Toowoomba, 18 the top for the Gold Coast tomorrow. Across parts of Brisbane, we've got showers on the way for Tuesday, 16 the top, so a little bit cool out there. You will need the jacket, 21, and just a shower or two Wednesday, so starting to ease as that system moves off the coast. Partly cloudy skies Thursday, mostly sunny and 21 Friday, and partly cloudy and dry at this stage for the weekend, Saturday and Sunday. No doubt that will be appreciated. For Sydney tomorrow, I'm expecting rain to persist during the morning and through the afternoon. It should start to clear a little bit as it contracts further north. 17 the top for Richmond and Bankstown, 18 for Parramatta and Penrith. Rain periods for the city, and then we're looking at a shower or two Wednesday and a top of 19. We're back to showers though as we get towards Thursday, Friday and into the weekend. So a couple of wet days ahead. We've got severe weather warnings in place tonight for heavy rainfall and damaging winds, and also those major flood warnings which are continuing across the Nepean and Hawkesbury valleys. So our thoughts are with everyone in those floodwaters tonight, Sandra.
They sure are. Thank you, Josh. We'll see you tomorrow. That's the news for now. This Monday, the 4th of July. The project is next from the news team. Thanks for your company. Stay dry and safe.